Welcome to Navigating Complex Divorce and Parenting Issues with Attorney Melanie Walls.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Navigating Complex Divorce and Parenting Issues with Attorney Melanie Walls. Melanie is an OSBA certified specialist in family relations law who works with families navigating complex custody arrangements, including situations where one parent is seeking to relocate. My name's Sean O'Connor, and today we're focusing on how relocation is handled in Ohio custody cases, what courts consider, and how these situations are evaluated when parents don't agree. Melanie, good to see you again.
Great seeing you, Sean.
So, probably not an uncommon scenario. One parent, for a job or other reasons, wants to leave the state. When a parent is considering a move like that, what would affect an existing custody arrangement? And what's the first legal issue that needs to be addressed?
So there's a process that you need to follow in Ohio courts if you want to relocate. You have to file a notice of intent to relocate with the court where your divorce decree or your dissolution of marriage was filed, or your, in juvenile court where your custody agreement was filed. And then you have to serve the other parent. So it's a court form that is filled out and it's filed with the court that puts the other parent on notice of your intent to relocate. And each court has timelines for that. So, for example, if you're going to relocate within the county, it has to be filed so many days in advance, typically 30 days, because relocating within a county really doesn't impact your parenting time schedule. If you want to relocate outside of the county, that's typically 90 days because that may impact a parenting schedule. And if you're moving out of state, it's still the same 90-day requirement. They don't have a different requirement for moving out of state. It's just typically 30 days if you're relocating within the county, and then 90 days if you're relocating outside of the county.
Got it. Are there other legal requirements other than, obviously submitting those documents and adhering to those timelines? Are there other things that the relocating parent has to do for a move to actually happen?
So a parent can move anywhere they want, anytime they want. What they can't do is move the children. So the issue is, what is your current parenting schedule? Because that is a court order that you're required to follow. So does the move allow you to continue the existing parenting schedule? If not, the parent moving is still under a court order. So for example, let's say, mom and dad were divorced in Warren County and they have a shared parenting plan with equal parenting time. Dad gets a new job offer that's going to require him to move to Florida for his job. He files a notice of intent to relocate that he's, planning to move to Florida in 90 days. Well, the current parenting schedule will no longer work. There's going to have to be a modification of that court order. Now, if the parents agree, this is what we're going to do when dad moves to Florida, they just file an agreed entry and there's no further court action needed. But if the parents can't agree, then, dad, who's the one moving, is probably going to have to file a motion to modify the shared parenting plan to change the parenting schedule.
And I mean, obviously, a court considering these kinds of disputes, they're going to, certain factors are going to carry more weight. You mentioned the parenting plan, best interest of the kids, I'm sure, comes into play here. What other considerations carry a lot of weight in the court's decision?
So the best interest statute is what the court looks at, and it will go through all of the best interest factors to determine what parenting schedule will work. It's a difficult motion. It's a difficult case to present. You don't want a parent to turn down a lucrative job offer, but you know, if you have children in two different states, the best a court can do with an out of state parenting schedule is, for example, give dad all the 4-day weekend holidays, Labor Day, Memorial Day. Sometimes they may give dad, and this is just in this example of dad moving to Florida and mom remaining in Ohio. They may give dad 1 week after school ends to 1 week before school begins. So he gets most of the summer. But every child is different. Every family is different. If you have a child that's heavily involved in sports throughout the school year, then you're sending them to Florida for the summer. I mean, obviously that may or may not have an impact on the child. I mean, some children might say, great, I get to go to Florida for the summer. Guys, you're stuck here in Ohio. But, for other kids, they may not want to be away from their friends for an entire summer. So it's a really difficult case for the courts
Yeah.
to rule on.
Yeah. I mean, just mentioned some of the factors there in terms of the age of the kids. They're going to have more or less say in what happens, in my experience. So you talked earlier, Melanie, about, um, moving within the county versus outside of the county, moving out of state, which is our main focus here. Obviously, distance is a factor, right? Are there other ways in which distance influences the way a relocation request is reviewed by the court?
Absolutely. And the age of the child comes into play also. For very young children, a lot of times the court will put the burden of travel on the parent that is moving.
Right.
You know what? You're going to do your parenting time here in Ohio. You're going to have to do the driving. We're not putting a 1-year-old, in a car for 2 hours, to get to the other parent. Once the children are older, they might say, okay, mom and dad, we're going to pick a halfway point and you're going to meet halfway. Now that assumes that the parents are within a reasonable driving distance of each other, and that makes sense. If they're not within reasonable driving distance, you've got a real problem with children until they're old enough to fly with a companion, which some parents may not be comfortable doing that at all. Then you've got a cost problem. If mom relocates for whatever reason out of state, does she have the financial means to pay dad to fly down with the child for visitation? So you've got logistical constraints because of the distance. You've got logistical constraints because of the age of the children. And then there's also the financial constraints of, how do we make this financially feasible to do the exchanges? So there's a lot of moving pieces in relocation cases. And sometimes there isn't a great solution.
Yeah. Yeah, very complex. What about reflecting on your practice, your experience? I'm wondering if you can describe a situation where, a proposed move required significant restructuring of the parenting schedule, and what considerations shaped that outcome.
One of the things you find with relocation cases is it's so case specific
Mm.
and it's court specific. I mean, there's not a bright line rule in Ohio about these relocation cases. I mean, I had a case where, both parents were very, very involved with the children. Extended families were very, very involved with the children. You put on your case that the children have ties to the community, they have ties to the family, they have friends here, they have family here, they've been going to school here, and sometimes you can still have a court rule that the kids get to move to Texas with the other parent. And I, had a case once where, after the case was over, I asked the court, 6 months later or whatever it was, I just don't understand, the rationale between letting mom move with these children, to Texas. And the court's response was, I couldn't have a parent give up that job opportunity. Now, do I agree with that decision? Absolutely not. I mean, do I think that, a parent's job or some, lucrative job or money should trump, parenting and being with both parents? No. Does that decision still bother me to today? Yes, but
Yeah.
I mean, and it just goes to show you the uncertainty of this situation. I mean, the court, it can go either way. Even if you put on every single best interest factor that points towards those kids staying put, and where they have friends in the neighborhood and family and school, and you can still have a court rule that the parent gets to move to another state with them. So it's a very tough part of family law.
Yeah. Any given courtroom, any given judge, it can go either way sometimes, I hear. What about, when a relocation is approved, what tends to change in the parenting plan to preserve both parents' involvement?
So, it's 2026, which is a good thing for parents because, 20 years ago, if you had a parent move to Alaska, you were going to what? Write the kids a letter every day, make a phone call, but you weren't going to get to see their face. Now you have, you know, FaceTime, you have Zoom. I mean, kids today have tablets and they're texting at age 6, or their communication is different. You don't have the disconnect like you had years ago. So, relocation in some respects is a little bit better because you can maintain, while it doesn't replace a hug or in-person contact with your kids, you can still, play games with them at night. You can read them a book at night. You can interact with them on a tablet. So I
Yeah.
think, the quality of the parent-child contact for long distance has vastly improved with technology, to allow the bond to continue, where we didn't have those tools 20 years ago and you were just stuck with sort of an impersonal, telephone call. Now you can have face-to-face communication and interaction with them.
Yeah, you mentioned, tech, social media, that sort of thing came up in a previous conversation with us. And, for all the downsides of social media, there are the benefits too. If your kids are of a, probably a, more of a teenage situation, you see what's going on Instagram or Facebook and some of that where, you can uh, converse and interact around some of that too, which helps keep that connection uh, alive. Not a hug, but it's an awareness and an arm's length involvement. I know from my own experience, it has value.
it's a great tool for parents in those situations.
Yep.
And it's a great tool for divorce attorneys. Even I try to advocate for daily FaceTime contact, especially when they're young.
Yeah.
Teenagers, they don't want to talk to mom or dad. They want to
Right.
interact with their friends. But I mean, it's very important, when they're younger, to have daily FaceTime with the other parent.
Yeah. Lots of contact, uh, not necessarily length, but frequent matters a lot, especially at that young age. So, at the risk, Melanie, I don't want to end on a negative note per se, but I want to ask one more question before we wrap up. And, the parent relocates, but they didn't address the legal requirements. How is that going to affect the court's response to the situation? Obviously negative, but what have you seen?
So, if a parent relocates and moves with the child, typically what would happen is the other parent would come into the office. You know, my former spouse moved with my child or children to X state. I haven't seen my children in a month. She won't communicate with me, or she'll communicate with me and tell me I need to drive here or fly here to see the children. So, we discussed earlier, they're under a court order. There's a court ordered parenting schedule. So you file a motion for contempt
Hmm.
with the court. So the court will set a hearing date. That parent will be required to appear in court.
Hmm.
And typically, the court will put a band aid on the situation to start and say, okay, we're going to do every other weekend, we're going to meet halfway, or, there's too many factors that go into this: age of the children, where the other
Sure.
parent. But,
I get it.
the moving parent's going to be required to appear in court.
Yeah.
And then, depending on the circumstance, the court will either, put a temporary fix on the situation, put in some temporary orders, or they're going to order the parent to return the children. Um, if I'm representing the parent that moved, my initial response is, look, you're going to have to give that parent some parenting time. Let's figure out something on a temporary basis, and try to show the court that you are trying to cooperate and fix the situation. I mean, sometimes it's intentional, and sometimes it's just not. They just
Yeah.
don't realize, hey, you can't just up and move.
Right.
um but you want to try to do damage control if you're representing the parent that moved. If you're representing the parent that hasn't seen their child in a while, obviously you want to demand an immediate return of the children. Is that going to happen right away? No. So you want to brainstorm with your client before court to have, plan A, B, and C. A is, you know, give the children back. They can stay here with the other parent till we work this out. Court's not really a fan of, moving the kids back and forth. So what's our plan B? What can we work out given that the other parent is in another state? What's a midway point? Or, can you take some vacation time and fly down there? You really have to, get creative for that initial court hearing. And then eventually, if the parents can't work it out, it would be set for a full hearing on a new parenting schedule.
Got it. Got it. Well, that makes a lot of sense. And obviously, case by case, like so many of this, so much of this work. Melanie, we're out of time for now, but as always, great to see you. Thanks for sharing your expertise and insights.
Great seeing you, Sean.
That's it for today's episode of Navigating Complex Divorce and Parenting Issues with Attorney Melanie Walls. To learn more about Melanie's practice or to request a consultation with her, visit the website melaniewallslaw.com. I'm Sean O'Connor. As always, thanks for listening. Don't forget to leave a thumbs up, maybe subscribe to the podcast, or share the show with someone in your world who you think might benefit from these conversations. Have a great day.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.